Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, the Flying V edition, where we talk to incredible people who are creating impact and ripples on the pond. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is an odd duck, but that's what makes them awesome. Today, my guest is James Loomstein. Now, James is one of the managing partners in Rogue Marketing in Dallas, Texas, y'all. James is also a teacher at Southern Methodist University, teaching digital strategy for entrepreneurs. Rogue Marketing creates marketing and digital strategies for small to medium-sized businesses and does an amazing job at it. You have to check them out. You have to listen to James talk about being meaningful, specific, and being a wandering generality. It really captures his essence. James is obviously a meaningful, specific, and a lifelong learner, and it definitely shows. James also gets to better the pond by being the organizer for the holiday toy drive with Santa's helpers, making Christmas special for so many children. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to introduce to you James Loomstein. James Loomstein, managing partner of Rogue Marketing. Now, I met you back down in Dallas, Texas, y'all. I get to say that. I get to say that.
Hey.
And
Yes,
and we have to give a shout out for Vistage, but to your chair, Ken Stibler.
Stibs.
Stibbs, we got to give him the shout out. So there, we got that out of the way. James Loomstein, Rogue managing partner of Rogue Marketing, and I know that you're a professor, Southern Methodist University, teaching a course, Digital Strategy for Entrepreneurship, which I think is really fascinating that we talked a little bit about before we got on this call. So anyway, let's cut to the chase. James, absolutely. I am so excited to have you on the Better the Pond podcast.
I couldn't be more proud to be here. It's an honor and a privilege, I think, to share the stage, to be with you, Warren.
Wow. How many Pondcasts have you been on thus far?
First Pond, and I could almost say I'm international now.
You are international.
That's the U.S. Canada thing. I'm an international star now.
You are. We're taking you on the international stage.
I'm global. I'm going global here.
All right. So, first question out of the gate here for you, James, is tell my audience a little bit about Rogue Marketing. What do you do? How do you shake things up? How do you make things happen?
Let's go back to like kind of actually the start, because I think it's a very interesting story and how Rogue evolved. So back in the day, 2004, 5, 6, 7, I was working at Omnicom and I was in the agency world. And then in 2010, I decided to go out on my own. I started my own company called Digital Space. And along the way, I ended up with a project opportunity at a company called Crown that was later bought by Razorfish and then Accenture. And there was a guy there named Chip who led the practice lead at Crown. And he ended up hiring me for this project. And we worked really well together. Well, fast forward a year later, he left. And then I left. I went back to running my digital space. He went back to running his company, Rogue. And then over time, we were kind of working together and found out we were better together, brought our agencies together, kept the Rogue name. And where it comes from is this idea of, working on projects or seeing the world differently and looking at ourselves almost like a group of misfit toys coming together that are here, that have a little bit of a chip on our shoulder, that kind of see the world as like, how do you level set? How do you move things forward? How do you help companies achieve outcomes? And how do you help them actually grow? So both of us he came from Fortune 500 world. I came from Omnicom world, worked on brands, jumped into this mid-market world, small mid-market world, because we felt we can make the biggest splash and we can help the most people here. It'd be really easy for us to go and get jobs at, a consulting company or an agency and work on those companies, but you actually couldn't see the needle move. And so the idea of Rogue and where we're at, we are largely a B2B. Mm-hmm. We are largely working with mid-sized companies who are growth-oriented, who have an outcome they want to achieve, and who want to believe what we believe. And we believe a couple things. One, we believe that marketing should be valued and valuable to an organization. And the second thing that we believe is that companies should be able to defend their marketing spend. And that marketing today is not the arts and crafts crowd. It's not the make it pretty people. And our job at Rogue is to help these companies with the outcome. So whether that's move into a new market, whether that's launch new products, whether that's ready themselves for an exit, that is where we focus our energy and efforts. And those are the types of companies that we seek to serve.
I love it. I was looking on your website earlier today and looking a lot on the quotes. I really actually quite enjoyed it. And I saw a theme in there, which is when you say it's a bit of a chip on your shoulder, and I see that definitely in a positive fashion.
Yeah.
But it was all these sort of really think differently. Think like like one of the quotes that it's not the wand, it's the magic.
Yes.
Right?
It's not the coffee, it's not the cup, it's not the container, it's the coffee inside, right? Things like
Yeah.
that.
And if you're not experiencing
That's
pushback, maybe you're pushing in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
So
we have a lot of those quotes.
Yeah.
Actually probably made over 600 of them, honestly, that float between our website and social channels. And actually take a lot of pride in creating those. And honestly, they come from everyday things. Like there's one about the artist, and literally came from being at Disney World with our kids and seeing the people that kind of just the street performer in the middle, about like, how do they get hired to do the thing? And it's, if all these people walking by, how do you get that attention as the artist to get people to come and pay attention to you? And I think it's the same things that brands and companies face. And it's not because he's wearing red or blue, or the font is this or that. It's like the thing. And
Right.
so, and that is how we've sort of evolved in Rogue. And I appreciate you calling out the quotables and spending some time on those. So thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And I'd say, my listeners, let's give a shout out to your website right now.
Yeah, gorogue.net.
Gorogue.net. Go there and look at these quotables, because I think it really encapsulates. I think it was genius. I love your site. Love what you're doing. And so then it obviously shows that next level of what you guys, you're showing it for yourself. That's what you do for your clients.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I have one question for you on that, right? I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot because I know you're a quick thinker. What makes Rogue exceptional?
I would find in most of the agency world, or just marketing in general, I feel like it's a lot of how do we replicate and scale? So if we're a company and we make websites, how do we make 40 websites? If we write content, we write one blog, how do we write 1,000 blogs? And I think what probably I don't like to use the word exceptional, but thank you very much for that, would be that we go very deep with clients. And so we don't carry 1,000 clients. We carry like 10, 15, 20. And the idea is to go very deep with them. And so if somebody comes to Rogue and they're like, build me a website, I'm like, we can, but it's not what we do. Or do my social, we can, it's not what we do. But if you are trying to get somewhere and you are on step 1, 2, 3, and you're trying to make that step to 4 and 5, and after that, you know where to go, let us help you get from step 3 to 4 to 5. And whether that's pulling on a business background, whether it's operations focused, whether it's marketing, whether it is, connecting dots and connecting technology, like what's the thing that's holding you back? And when people say they have a marketing problem, it's rarely a marketing problem. It's somewhere either up at the top, down at the bottom, or from consideration to purchase, where there is something broken. So I would say our superpower, if you were looking for one, would be our ability to shine spotlights and come in that we might do the marketing things. We might carry the marketing toolbox, but that's not who we are. We are actually business builders who carry those things, who carry those spotlights, who shine spotlights on problems to help businesses be able to move forward. And like I said, it's rarely because I'm using red instead of blue. That might be great at Nike and P&G, Under Armour, or American United Airlines, but that's not the thing that's holding back X manufacturing company from Wichita, Kansas from being successful.
So what I heard from all that, right? Going deep and making it very personal and really understanding who your client is and how do you get them from point A to Z.
Yeah.
That's
Or
what makes you exceptional.
even moving people from like point A to done. Like there's a lot of activity out there. There's a lot of we are doing stuff. And when leadership and executives come in, everyone's busy, but nothing's actually happening. So how do we focus on the outcome? How do we decide these are the things that matter today? And these might be good ideas, but they're not now ideas. So how do we find those things and then not be beholden as marketers or creatives or content or agencies that we have to use this hammer? Like that's a very tactical approach is, oh, your problem's the website. Oh, your problem's the content. Oh, your problem's you don't have enough video. Well, we happen to do all those things, right? Like we happen to be video production. We happen to be, and so when coming in and someone already has an ideology or someone who is great at doing the thing is like, you know what, if you just did this, that would solve all your business problems. We're trying to come in as the business builder, right? To help you move into that new market, launch that new product. So what are the things that you need done in order to make that thing happen without being beholden to XYZ technology or tactic?
Rogue quotable. Step outside of the noise.
Step outside of the noise.
Step outside of the noise. That's awesome. All right, let's talk a little bit about you here, James. So I want to know, right? I'll met you all the way down, y'all in Texas. There's my drawl. So what got you from being a Gosling? I mean, where did you start life? I know that you were born at a very young age.
Yes.
So what got you from being a Gosling when you started your life, right? To leaving the nest. Now, leaving the nest is when you actually got out and left home. Now, either you got kicked out and said, go fly and go away, or you decided to gently leave on your own, to where you are today. James Loomstein, what is your backstory?
So born and raised in Texas, grew up only child, and grew up in a small business family, honestly. My dad was a neuropsychologist and ran a medical group and a consulting group. My mom was a teacher, ran a learning resource center, so a tutoring company. So I grew up like after school going to the business. And it wasn't like, kids who grew up in restaurants who, wash dishes and, clean off plates. My job was organizing, making copies, setting up files, like trying to solve problems. And it was like, go figure it out. And how do we make this happen? And so during high school, I really had the athletic bug. I had the marketing bug, just like probably every teenage boy does, at some point who wants to work on music or art or sports or whatever the thing is. Ended up going to college up in Illinois at Bradley University and graduated from there, moved to Chicago, found out it's cold there a lot. And then after 6 Midwest years, decided to move back to Dallas. And so early 2000s, I'm back in Dallas. I wanted to work in marketing, and I had started in consulting. And so found out that if you wanted to work in marketing back then, at the time, you had to do one of two things. You either had to go start at some entry-level position, and I'd been working for 2 or 3 years, thinking I was great, and going to work at some agency and starting at the bottom, or you went to grad school. Those are kind of the two choices. I went with the grad school choice, got into SMU here in Dallas, and got into marketing and strategy. And so I knew I wanted to be in the agency world. At the time, I was working at Verizon and found out very quickly, I'm like, oh, I got into SMU. I'm going to be great. But then all my classmates are product managers at Frito-Lay. They work in marketing at American Airlines. They do this at JP Morgan Chase. They did this at Southwest. Like there's a lot of corporations here in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, after my end of my first year, I was like, not only do they have the same piece of paper I have, they also have the 2 to 3 years experience already at these places. So when I go to apply at Southwest or American or Nike or whatever, we're going to be the same. except they're going to have the experience. I'm going to have my marketing at Verizon, which wasn't really marketing. And so at the time, Verizon offered a separation agreement, and I took it. And the reason I took it is because I had to build up my portfolio. So I ended up in a race against time in my second year doing my MBA that I needed to have stories to tell. I did this marketing project. I worked on this. I went to all the alumni of SMU who worked in agencies, and a guy named Ian gave me my shot. And he brought me under his wing. He was working in a company called IMC Squared, brought me in, allowed me to build a portfolio. I got to work on Pfizer. I got to work on Marriott. I got to work on a couple other like pharmaceutical companies at the time, at least enough to say I did market research. I did XYZ. I was an analyst, blah, blah, blah. Ended up getting me into Omnicom at agency.com. I started as a business analyst and worked in the strategy group. And my job was largely business insights, competitive analysis, and industry, and looking at industries and insights. And I did that for a couple of years. And then you're talking like mid 2000s, where life is good but not great, and things are getting a little rocky, and found myself out of a job. And then went to another agency and found myself out of a job. And by the third time, I was like, why is this happening to me? I'm like, I went to grad school. I'm smart. I've worked at these places. Why do these other people get to keep their jobs? And it led me to something very specific, and Seth Godin does a good job of this, is that you are either a meaningful specific or a wandering generality. And every time I'm like, I'm the wandering generality. I'm good at the stuff, but I'm not needed in the bottom of the ninth. I'm not needed in the fourth quarter. You only need those people. And so playing it out, it is 2008. I get laid off in 2009. Actually, it was June 12th, 2009, because I remember the moment. Our first kid was born in March of 2009. June 12th, my wife is on unpaid maternity leave. We're both sitting at home. I'm getting ready to go to some golf event. I'm already dressed. And my boss calls me and is like, we have a problem. Our biggest client, Kia, where I've been traveling to LA from Dallas, is like, they want to making a change. They need somebody with automotive experience who can be there all the time. Somebody was just let go from Hyundai about 10 minutes away, has all the automotive experience in the world. And so I was out again. And so I was the wandering generality.
Yeah.
And so I found out, I needed to get good at something. And so at the time, I doubled down in the digital marketing side, Google AdWords, SEO, Google Analytics, WordPress. Like, I'm not a developer, but I can at least talk about it. And I had come from a consulting background, and I started my own thing called Digital Space, and found that I just need to build up story after story after story. And if I could build up enough stories, I can move from small company working on their stuff to a little bit bigger, to a little bit bigger, to a little bit bigger. And so over 4 years, I ended up growing Rogue. I had several contractors and freelancers and all those things. And I got into the problem that pretty much every single person who goes off to be an independent consultant runs into, is that number one is not understanding how much non-billable time goes into a billable hour. And number two is that you are basically funding everybody else's lifestyle. And so when you have these clients who are going to pay you X amount, and you have freelancers who you're going to pay per hour, well, you're hoping that you're going to be enough profit margin. And by the end of the day, you're very busy, your revenues are going up, but your profit is not.
Right.
And so you find yourself in this vicious cycle. I think everyone does, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where I was like, I need something. I know I have something here. We need to bring it together. We need to make it happen. And that's where Chip and I kind of came back together. We were tossing work back and forth to each other. The only person really winning was the IRS. Like, how do we actually make this happen? Brought our agencies together in 2016. Here we are, 7-8 years later, still going. And I think the reason it works is from an ideology standpoint, we actually look at things from two completely different ways, but end up getting the same outcome. Like, we're both business builders. He came from corporate America. I came from the agency world. It's amazing how much that actually helps versus when you're, looking for a co-founder or doing something yourself. Is finding someone who's like you is not a good way to go.
Bingo.
And so how do you overcome that? And so that's what we work on all the time. And that's sort of how it's kind of a long way of saying, like, this is how I got here. So it was moving from being a wandering generality to a meaningful specific, understanding what it actually takes to build businesses, not just do the thing. And then finding a way to be focused on, this is who we are and this is who we are for. And this is who we are not for.
Love it. Okay, I got some questions for you.
Yes, sir.
That was genius. All right. Looking back when you were a kid, did you ever see yourself in this space, in this creative? We always a creative kid, always dreaming and looking at possibility and opportunity.
I was a little like that. I, had the typical entrepreneur thing, right? Where I did mowed lawns. I worked for my parents. And then when I was like 16, I always loved sports, still love sports. Fascinated by like the sports marketing world. And I always felt like that's where I was going to be. I was either going to work for a sports team or American Airlines. Those are going to be my two. I love travel. I got to work for American Airlines in college out on the ramp. I was like, this guy.
Oh, yeah, that guy. Okay.
That guy. And then I did it in Peoria for American Airlines. It was American Eagle, 6 flights a day.
Huh.
And in between, you got to study. It was great until it was like February and you had to go out there and like de-ice planes, this glycol stuff all over you. But
yeah, lots of fun.
I love the job. And then when I was working, I got into like valet parking and just talking to people and understanding and working American and enamored by the business traveler, or like that smell of the airport, right? Like I loved it. And then like, how do I actually do this? And then when I really felt like I'd work in this marketing world. And when you didn't start there in 2000, you were on a track and then you couldn't get off that track. You couldn't like switch tracks like you can now, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what led me back to grad school. And I was like, either you're going to work at Frito-Lay and figure out how many more chips to put in a bag, or you're going to work at American and figure out how many more seats can we sell in yield management, but you're not actually making things happen. And so working on the agency side, cool brands, but at the end of the day, your opinion really didn't matter. Like you didn't really do things like you work on P&G. Pampers is going to be okay. Duracell is going to be all right.
Yeah.
Regardless of this campaign thing that we're putting together. So I was like, what are we doing here? And that's when I had this real thing for, the small business side. And I still do. I love it because I feel like they're always getting the short end of the stick. And I grew up in a family that ran a small business. I grew up in a family that in the mid 90s saw technology take a step forward and our family kind of get left behind, honestly. And then in the mid 2000s, this digital web 2.0, this Facebook thing that, those are just for the kids, being like, this is a real thing. And brands were still not on board with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then being like, how do you actually make this happen? And then how do you go back and like help people move forward? Like that's always been a thing to me. And so whether it's in marketing or business or coaching my kids or teaching at SMU, like those are always the things that I probably enjoy the most rather than quote unquote, like doing the thing. And so I think probably from definitely an early age, it was sports and travel. And then it was sort of this, like, how do you help people move forward? And then that's shown itself running an agency, being responsible for all these people's lives and their livelihood and their family's livelihood, teaching the next generation of entrepreneur leaders and making sure they can learn from mistakes and they don't make, bad mistakes that are easily avoidable.
Mm-hmm.
And then, coaching kids too, which I've enjoyed as well.
Cool. 2 more questions. We'll move on. Number one lesson that you learned from your dad?
I call it the $150 lesson. And it goes like this. I graduated from college. I am living in Chicago. I am making $31,000 a year in Chicago. have my roommates. And at the time, I still had all 4 grandparents alive, which is pretty remarkable for being like 22, 23 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I had this idea. I'm like, if I just had an extra $400 or $500 a month, like I could go out, I could do these things. And so I came up with a plan. It's the $150 plan. I called my grandparents. I'm like, I'm their only grandson. They're going to give it to me. I'm like, Grandma, Grandpa, could I get $150 from you every month? I'm like, all right, yeah, sure. Call my other grandparents. Can I get it? I'm like, him and haw, but yeah, I'll send you $150. Call my parents. And my dad says to me, it's like, if you're putting this much energy and effort into getting $150 from each of these people, go work a little harder, go get a job valet parking, go get a job at the mall, do something else. But like this $150 thing is not happening. And I was angry. I was, pissed 22-year-old. Best lesson, probably one of the best lessons I got was, and to this day, I always think about it, is that if you don't have, like, no one ever has enough, right? There's never enough of anything. But instead of trying to figure out ways to go other places and do it, just work in your world and try and get the extra $150 out of that. The second lesson I learned from my dad is when he was running a company called Biotech Institute, he did a lot of like expert witness testimony and working on cases. And I'll never forget, we sat in this room, it was called conference room number 9, just had a 9 on the door. And like papers everywhere. And it was late. And he's like, I'm like, let's just go home. And he's like, I can't be wrong. He's like, I'm just a small business owner and one consultant. I don't work for a big hospital. And if we're going in and I'm trying to help these people, if I don't show that I know all this stuff, then cases get tossed out or things don't go your way. And it was always that underdog mentality, kind of like the IBM thing, that if you walk in and you're IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, you automatically assume they're right. And even if they're not, it's okay. It's probably going to work out. But when rogue marketing walks in, you have to be right. And if you're not right, you get overlooked and pushed out and it doesn't matter. And so that room number 9 experience and the $150 lesson probably been like 2 of the largest ones that have stuck with me for the past 40 plus years now.
Love it. What about Mom? What was the biggest lesson that you learned from her?
Her ability to walk into a room and be able to deal with one audience on one level, and then walk into another room, a completely different audience, and talk with them on their level. So the ability of connecting with people, and if you're in a room full of people, trying to make them feel like they're the most important person in the room. So that empathy and compassion part of it, the teacher part, comes from her as well. And then I would say my ability to walk into a room of 5th graders and have a conversation at their level, or coach basketball at their level that they get, and then walk into a room of MBAs and talk at their level, to going to a nonprofit and helping people who are trying to get a business started and talk at their level. Like I do feel like that is a gift I have that I try and use, is that ability to walk into different situations and then adapt to that situation, high, low, middle, whatever matters, be able to come and have a conversation with them. And I think that comes a lot from my mom.
Cool. Love it.
A whole lot.
All right. Cool. That's fantastic. I love it. So James, what's the greatest thing, positive or negative, that's happened to you that's ruffled your feathers? And how did you respond to it?
June 12th, 2009 is my wife and I sitting there changing Brennan. He's 3 months old at the time. I get let go from my job. My wife is on unpaid leave. She went to medical school. She was a physician assistant, PA, who'd been working for like 8 years at the time. And you have 2 people who just moved into a house the year earlier, staring at each other. Being like, this is not how it's supposed to go. And then having the ability to be like, every 3 years, it was another layoff. And I was playing out like from the agency world, from like 2003 to 2005, like 2.5 years. And if you wanted to move up, you had to move out and you had to move over somewhere else. And I did not want to play that game. I'm actually terrible at that game. And then, and having a wife who is like, we got this. We are going to make this all happen. She ended up hustling, getting her own, like basically nursing job, working into a position, and then always saying yes to things. And so going and starting my digital space consulting, and it was hard to have literally like convenience stores and law firms and small doctors' offices as your clients, and then have an agency. Like I could go get an account manager job. I could go get an account supervisor job, and make 60 grand, 70 grand, and it'd be fantastic. And saying no to those and being like, I am doubling down on myself and I am not taking a paycheck. Like I refused. And my thing for the last 14 years has been that is like, I will play until there's $1 left. And the only way I will lose is if I ever take a W-2 paycheck. And so for the entire time now has been, how do we do that? How do we make sure that we don't take a W-2 paycheck? And it is, sacrificing, grind, and saying yes to things, and speaking, and going to client sites, and up early, all those things. Like it'd be so easy to go get the paycheck. And so when I talk to people who like want to start a company, I'm like, what's your dream job? And they're like, so and so. I'm like, great. If they called you in 6 months, would you take it? They're like, yeah. I'm like, don't start a company. I'm like, spend 6 months trying to get a job there. And I do that. Like, I say that about myself. Like, if Nike called me and like you, I'm like, no. If the Dallas Mavericks called me and Cubans like, hey, James, I'd love for you to come. I'm like, no, I couldn't do it. Like, I embrace the suck. To some detriment, like love losing. I love the chip on my shoulder. And like, I feel like you have to have that ability to almost sit in the ocean. You ever sit at a beach in an ocean and the wave hits you and then the next wave hits you? Like that mentality to do that every day and love it is more important and means more than your ability to do the thing. Like if you're great at the thing, you're a great mechanic, you're great computers, you're a killer design, your video production's amazing. Doing that is 1,000 times different than starting a business about that thing. Like your ability to make decisions in a sea of chaos, in utter darkness, and be able to move forward, far more important than your ability to code.
Right.
And so that's why I love like Navy SEALs and military and sports teams. Like that last 2 minutes in utter chaos, the ability for that quarterback to calm in the moment and make that play or that pass, or the Navy SEAL commander to do the thing. Like I respect that way more than their ability to do the stuff. I respect like Patrick Mahomes and Steph Curry and all these guys and LeBron who can quiet the moment and still show up and perform. And so I always kind of like keep that in the back of my mind. And watching like sports today, watching an Alabama team or a Georgia or a Michigan or Ohio State where there's 2 seconds left and they have to make the play, they make it. And the person at Kent State or Wichita or Nevada or like the lower school, they missed the field goal. They missed the free throw. Alabama, you do not miss that extra point. You do not miss that pass. Michigan, you don't miss that free throw, right? It's just, you're just built different. And so over the last 10 years, I've really started to respect those people who can be quiet in that moment and perform and do the thing and trust in their teammates and understand they don't have to take the last shot and they're cool with being second. They just want to win. And so, I tell that to my team all the time. I'm like, I don't need to be the quarterback. I don't have to have my name on the shirt. I just want the trophy. And so whatever I can do to help us win the trophy and be on the team, like I'm 1,000% for it.
So interesting thing that, and I'm gonna you actually gave me the prelude to the next question, but one of the things I was listening to you talk is saying, and going back to your quotable is like step outside of the noise, right? When chaos is hitting and it's the last minute or that's the last whatever, right? And then you make the world go quiet, right?
Mhm.
And that's when you dial in, right?
Love it.
That's right. That's that space. So I love it. So going
Say
back
that
into
one more time say that one more time for the kids in the back, because I honestly I do, because I think it's really, really important that if you are a company owner, and I don't care if it's Bezos at Amazon, or
Mhm,
you run a plumbing supply company, or you do carpet cleaning, it doesn't matter, or you're at Nike, like, you have to be able to be calm in the moment.
mhm,
And I think that is one of the most underrated skills. You don't teach that at business school. You don't learn it in college, right? You don't see it in high school. So, like, how do you train that muscle and that ability to be that person? And I think it comes from just observation, from watching to listening to reading books to understanding how these people do this. And I think it's one of the most probably important roles in running a business, is that, like, I don't, you can be the best coder in the world, fantastic,
yeah.
but doing the thing and building a business around the thing are two completely different things.
Mhm.
Right? Like, just because you're a great baseball player doesn't mean you're a great coach.
Right. Well, they usually aren't actually.
They aren't, yeah,
So,
they aren't.
so interesting enough, as sort of this as this conversation's going, is again stepping outside of the noise, which is your codable, which I love. But the second piece to that too is the work that I do is trusting your instincts, right? And your instincts come when you're quiet, right? Your
Mhm.
instincts come when they're talking to you. When you have too much noise and you're trying to outthink yourself, or you're just getting in your own way.
Mhm.
So getting quiet and then letting your wisdom come through is how you make, in my opinion, is how you make your best decisions, but
Yeah.
allowing it to occur.
One thing I always love learning, and I play golf. I'm a terrible golfer, but showing up at the driving range an hour early and hitting 100 balls is not going to make you perfect for that round. And so, really showing up and appreciating that has actually been very helpful to playing golf. Like, show up, hit a couple shots. You're going to still shoot 100, 110. Like, it's still going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, why put all that stuff on you when just be quiet in the moment and just, next shot up? And I think the same thing in business too. Just next shot up, next phone call up, next meeting up, next, we tell that to our kids all the time. And I really feel like it's super important for people in business world to be able to have that quiet in the moment, the ability to think and not just react or chase things, and be able to play like the long game of it. Right.
Ah,
And probably
very
the most
good.
important part is never comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20.
Mhm.
And whether that's starting the business, Bezos started in his garage, blah, blah, blah. So did the guy who does the carpet cleaning, or the mortgage company, or the attorney. Is, you can't sit here and look at someone else's chapter 20 and say, why not me?
Mhm.
Because I promise you, there's someone behind you who's looking at you being
Mhm.
like, why not me?
And
No one ever looks
comparison,
back.
and the
Nobody ever looks back.
comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
Yes. So, all right. So let's go to the team side of things here, James. So as you know, because we have, I spoke to your group, your Vistage group. We'll give a shout out back to the Stibs again. So geese fly 71% further and faster when flying in the V formation. So what do you think the secret is to get a team flying in the V formation? What's your thoughts on really highly efficient, successful teamwork?
I think there's two things. I think one is around building alignment, and second is like championing that execution. Like, how do we do that? And then I think it came from conversational clarity, possibly, but like the leadership letter, like the 5, and it goes something like telling people where we are going, who is going with us, why we're going there, what they can expect, and then how are we going to get there. And I think if you can walk in and answer those questions and build that clarity around, this is the destination. Now, we're going from Dallas to LA. we are looking at going on an airplane. We might have to drive. We might have to take a train. We might have to walk. But at the end of the day, we are going to LA. This is who is going with us. This is why we're going. This is how we're going to get there. And then this is what you can expect when we get there. And I feel like the teams that understand that, who are doing their thing, might take a little longer, but they're not reactionary. And so you ever see those videos where, the pit stop, where, they bring in the Ferrari and it takes like 1.9 seconds?
Yeah.
I actually have a problem with that video. And here's my problem, is that everyone sees them being successful and getting down to 1.9 seconds. But you know what that Ferrari pit crew team is not doing? Last week, they weren't doing horse races. And the week before, they weren't doing boats. And the week before that, they weren't doing NASCAR. And the week before that, they weren't doing airplanes. They do their thing. They only work on Ferrari's race team. And the only thing they do is that thing, is getting cars from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1.9 seconds to do a pit stop. And they're bringing in people who are great at their thing and letting people be great at their thing. You're the best gas pump person. You're the best car jack. You're the best person with the drill. You're the best person to flag them in. But that entire team, they're focused on the thing. And so when the reason they got to 1.9 seconds is because they let everyone be great at their thing. And that's the only thing they do. And so when you get companies out there who this year we make widgets for companies in Mississippi. Oh, wait, now we're doing widgets for companies in Wisconsin. Oh, wait, now we're switching and we're going to be in this industry vertical. Oh, wait, we have this new AI tool. Oh, wait, we're going to that is where it comes from. That you don't get to 1.9 seconds doing that. And so when people see these videos and they're like, see, they're doing it. They've been doing it for so long and practicing it every day. They didn't show up last week and be like, you know what? I think we should be on a Ferrari race car team. And so but when you're the business and you see that, you're like, oh, we'll see, if we just get everyone aligned and we do this for a little bit, we'll be perfect. But you won't. And so that patience and time and in the moment, and we are only a Ferrari race car team. Like that, I feel like that is a real thing. And people get enamored by the Ferrari race car team chapter 20 versus the widget manufacturing in Wisconsin chapter 1. And so they're just comparing. They're like, see, why can't you guys be like this? But there's a reason, there's a reason why.
That'd be interesting as you say that. I've never heard anyone phrase it that way before, but I think from a business standpoint, right, the Ferrari race car team, right? But what happens, right? What would happen if a Lamborghini pulled in, or a Ford, or a Chevy, or a Kia, or a you name it, because that's welcome to business, right? Are they that 1.9 second team anymore?
No, they're not, because that's the thing they do.
Right.
And when you're a company and you're like, we're going to go into this vertical, or we've been making XYZ product. Let's do some cross channel and do this thing over here. Or, hey, there's a shiny new tool out there. Let's use that. Business is boring. Talk to musicians. You think the Eagles love playing Hotel California for the 40th, 5,000th time? No. I mean, do you think LeBron loves making 1,000 shots every single day? No, he embraces the suck.
Mm-hmm.
He embraces the journey and the path. And just next thing up, you think Nick Saban loves talking to 19-year-old punk kids who think they're just the world's greatest gift to everything every single year for 30? No.
Yeah.
Right. But that's the thing he does. He is not being like, you know what, I should take this methodology and go do hockey. It wouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And so they embrace the suck and the boring part of it. And that's the part people don't see.
Right.
Everyone sees them everyone sees an NFL player on Sunday, but they never see the 6 days of back-breaking work Monday through Saturday to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally with that. A good friend of mine, Gary Maxwell, which actually you saw,
Yeah.
and we would talk about being a speaker, and everybody's like, well, how hard can be just be to get up and speak on stage? It's like you never see all the hours, all the sucking behind it, creating
Yeah.
what you need to do to get there.
He's actually the one I think that did the Ferrari thing.
Oh, did he?
I might have been him.
Okay.
It was one of our speakers, but that's my problem with it. Is it's great when that's the only thing they do, but you're the manufacturing company and you're all over the place. Then you get back to everybody's busy and nothing's actually happening.
Right. All right. There we go. Let's move on. All right. So what are you doing right now, James, to better the pond? What ripples are you creating out there in the world?
Well, hanging out number one with people like yourself, I think we're probably at the top of the list. I actually try and bring it to my class. And I would say my class is built on practicality. And so I take an enormous amount of responsibility for putting together the right cases, the right projects, and the right speakers. Because I want students, when they come out, I want them to have a playbook and a blueprint that what I've learned, I could actually take this and I have an idea. I can actually at least start, step 1, 2, and 3, and at least be able to have that conversation versus being very theoretical or talking about big corporations or things that happen at Amazon. Like that is not relatable to me in the small business that I want to start. And it doesn't matter if I'm starting $1 million business or I got a bunch of seed money, still a small business. At the end of the day, I get somebody to take money out of their pocket and put it in my pocket. And so breaking that down and actually helping students have a different perspective and a thought process that kind of goes away from traditional MBA or traditional college for that matter, like the machine that you're around. Like you don't get that machine. You don't get to step into a Ferrari race car team. Like you're starting with, I think I want to race cars. And so how do you actually make that happen? And probably the biggest thing I talk about in my class is like, you're the CEO of the problem. Like whatever the problem is, you're the CEO of the problem. So how do you stay quiet in the moment? How do you make decisions in a sea of chaos? How do you know what levers to pull? And how can I help you in the most efficient way launch a venture with a playbook that is actionable? And so everyone asks me, when do you start working on your class? And when the last class is over. When does Saban start recruiting? The day after the season, always, but more importantly, the day after the season ends. It's a regular thing. I'm if you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to start a company, for years it was romanticized, right? Shark Tank and .coms, and when you're putting business owners on the front cover of Rolling Stone magazine, it looks cool. And for a while, you had people giving up on great positions at big companies because they were going to go be the CEO, and their mom said they were amazing. Right. And then at the end of the day, you got to be able to take money out of your pocket. Someone's got to take money out of their pocket and put it in yours.
Right.
And so how do you do that? And so whether it's, doing it at class, with working with businesses, with turning down projects, because I'm you're not ready, or go do these things, or, coaching basketball or talking with students, that's sort of the thing I take a lot of pride in. And, really trying to help those people be successful and see what it actually takes to play on Sunday, and embracing the suck that, that comes along with it.
Awesome. Can you tell me a little bit too about the holiday toy drive, Santa's Helper? There's the stuff that you're doing to make the world a better place as well.
So it started back in 2015, 16. There's a newscaster here in Dallas. There's been a big program called Santa's Helpers. And I was hey, wouldn't it be cool? And I was I see all these boxes, but they're never full. So what if we could take boxes and put them in the right places? that people go to on a repetitive basis. So I started with my kids like Primrose Daycare School. I started with a bike shop and a couple of restaurants. And then I got into like, well, this .com thing and e-commerce was taking off 2016, 17. I started Amazon wish list. And then I started like shipping everything to me. And the goal was like, how do you fill up an entire like U-Haul full of toys every year and be able to take it down? And it was great when my kids were younger and they got to be involved. And we used to like pack toys up and all those things. And that's been one. I love the Santa's Helpers toy drive. And then the other, my kids in this thing called YMSL. So it's Young Men's Service League. It's actually for moms and sons. I wish that dads could participate, but literally every month they're going something cool, giving back, playing with kids, veterans, homeless, mental illness, all those things, and trying to take things and values like from our family and pass it on and help out other people. And I think that's just kind of the nature of my family. I grew up where my dad worked with kids, my mom had a learning tutoring service, my wife is a physician. Like it's a very helping sort of environment. And so I think that's where all this kind of like comes from and gels.
Well, it's so interesting to listen because I mean, really, if you think about it, you're really helping and supporting business people.
Yeah.
Adults, business people. You're helping and supporting adult students in that age of life where they're trying to on their learnings, or you're helping and supporting that level, and you're also helping kids.
Yeah. And I'm trying to also help. I always look at the people who are a couple years ahead. So at the time, our kids are 14 and 11. So we're stuck where, entering high school and middle school. We have the group of friends where their kids are going off to college. And then you have the ones who are, have like the littles, like the 4-year-old and the 5-year-old, and being able to like look back and being like, oh, how can we help them? Whether like, hey, here's some clothes that we don't use anymore, or they don't like, or hey, here's a cool little thing you guys should think about going to, or here's a cool trip that we did that I think you guys would love. But then really paying attention to the ones above who are going on college campus tours and like listening to what they're hearing and understanding that what's happening today and education in colleges is way different than when we went to school back in like the 80s and 90s. And so how do we learn from them so when our kids get there, we're not giving them 80s and 90s information about college and how it works today versus them. So always being what we call a lifelong learner, I think is super, super important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you for bettering the pond, James.
I appreciate it. Thank you for putting this podcast together.
So I got one more question for you. I actually got two more questions for you. What's one lesson learned, along your path that you would share with an entrepreneur starting a business today?
The mental side of running a business is far more important and greater than your physical ability to do the thing. And I think so what I mean by that is the ability to make the decisions, like harnessing that. Making a decision is sometimes really hard for people. And not making a decision is still a decision.
Right.
So how do you make decisions? I think that is probably number one lesson I would give people. The second thing I would probably focus on is how are you the smartest person in the room at 10 a.m. and the dumbest person in the room at 2 p.m.? And how do you like keep showing up? I'm amazed and I listen to like people like Cuban and Seth Godin and Bezos, like how close they were to like it not working. Loving that. And like, you never know how close you were to it not working. Like from the outside and after the fact, you can see it.
Sure.
But during the moment, you don't, it's crazy. Mark Cuban lived with 5 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, 6 people in 2-bedroom. Found out, he did an interview a couple weeks ago that one of the ways he saved money was to go to supermarkets after midnight when they marked down the prices of things.
Hmm.
And you look at Mark Cuban like, there's no way. I'm like, there's a way. Like, no one sees the star like as they were growing up. And I'm always fascinated, like movie stars and athletes, and how hard it was to get to that like moment. And I feel like all of us are still chasing that moment. I bet all of those people still feel like they're waiting for their moment. So how do you have to be able to be okay with uncertainty. And if you need to control everything and you need everything perfect and you need to know, like, this is how our mortgage is going to be paid next month, like, this is not for you. And it sounds cool. But there's a lot of people, I'd rather be the number 5 person at Google than the number 1 person at blah, blah, blah company. And being okay with that. And I feel like there's a lot of the culture of startup and entrepreneurship. And, make the joke about your mom thinking you're great, but it's a real thing. The American Idol phenomenon, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where you've been told your entire life you're great. And you get on the stage, you're like, why is this person even here? And they're blown away. They're like, oh, they don't see it in me. They didn't hear what I heard. They do.
Yeah, and what's interesting about the way you just said, right? That's a really good point. About from an entrepreneur learning, right? Is because you finally get on stage because your mom says you're great, right? And you find out that why is this person even there? So that they tell you suck. Now at that point, you have a decision to make, right? Either you're going to say, well, that's they don't know what they're talking about, and you could stay on your ego and keep doing what you're doing, or you could actually leverage it and go, maybe I have some work to do.
Yeah.
Get better.
When people tell you the truth, you should believe them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who I'm like, no, they're probably telling you the truth. And so that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you do it with your kids or your employees or putting people in the right position to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And like knowing the stuff that you're great at, doubling down on that, dropping the things you're terrible at, moving forward. Like, I'm never going to be good at chemistry or biology or math or probably grammar. So I know that. So why don't I just focus on the things that I am great at and just do that thing, and then surround myself with the people who are great at the other things that make successful. And if it's the person who, if you're going to start a company and you have to be on the field, you have to be the quarterback, you have to win the game, and you have to be the MVP, it doesn't work out very well. Ever. And that goes in acting, theater, music, art, business, politics, like medical, anything. If you have to be that person, there is nobody who has made that successful.
And winning alone would mean that there's no one to high five with.
It's true. Hey, if you want to go fast, go alone. Go together, whatever that phrase is. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go
together. Go together. There's the quote. So where'd you see that?
Probably on a quotable.
Yeah, and it was in your Vistage talk.
It was anyway. On the internet. It's on the
YouTube. All right, one last question, which you do not have, and I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here, James. Last question of the day is: if you were standing on a mountain and the whole world was intently listening to you, what would you say?
It's like a Lewis Howes question. What could I say? Is it the whole world?
Whole world's listening to you. They're intently listening to you.
Probably go back to, well, it's the top of mind. Double down on the things you're great at and drop the things you suck at. I feel like that's a very real thing. There's no reason. We live in a world today where who is the 19th US president? The answer is it doesn't matter, because I have Google and I can find the answer. I don't need to memorize. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Right.
But how do you go and find that like matters way more. And so knowing what you are great at and just doing that thing, far more important than trying to be the one who does all the things. I see it so much.
Mm.
That would be my answer.
Fair enough. And that's a great answer. I love it. So, I just want to wrap this up here, James, and, just listening to this whole conversation, great conversation. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
But going back to the, your dad, with his $150 lesson, and being right about, you gotta be right what you gotta be what you're doing. And in your mom's, empathy, compassion, and be able to talk to different audiences in different ways. And I really wrap that up in a way that when I, sort of really encapsulates you from my perspective, is it goes into that meaningful specific.
Yeah.
And not the wandering generality. And I really think when I really listen to this, and I go to that meaningful specific, everything weaves to that. So it's an interesting thing how in the lessons that your mom and dad taught you, and really I see you playing that out through this conversation and what you're doing in the world.
I appreciate that. And I learned that lesson after getting laid off for the third time.
Mm-hmm.
And I could have played the victim. I could have been like,
mm-hmm.
They suck. They don't know me. They don't know how great I am. They.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why does this keep happening to me? And then really understanding, I use this example to speak for your audience too, is this basketball example. So the Golden State Warriors, they're a great team. They're a great team today. They were an amazing team 4 or 5 years ago. And the example I give is when there's 2 minutes left in the game, there might be 12 people on the team. There might be 25 overall, but there's only 5 on the court.
Right.
And Draymond Green does defense. And Klay Thompson makes jumpers. And Steph Curry makes threes. And Kevin Durant does his thing. Everybody has a role to play, like the Ferrari. And if you're not one of the starting 5, you might be on the team. But when the moment is the biggest, there's only 5 players. There's only 11 out there on football. There's only 9 out there in baseball. When they call the actor, there's only one who's going to do that role really well. When there's the musician, there's only one who's going to do that thing. And so you might be a great utility player, a great person to have around, but when times are tough, economies are bad, cuts are made, there's only 5 left on the basketball court. And I think learning that lesson, and even telling it to our kids, and to other people, is are you either the wandering generality or you're the meaningful specific? At the end of the game or the quarter or business financial period, someone's got to make the decision. Someone has to say, this is what we're doing. And so how do you take that and have that philosophy, and not it was the refs, Wall Street doesn't know what they're talking about, my VP of production doesn't do this, right? And having that almost humility to be how do I don't have to be the quarterback. I don't have to be the MVP. I just want to win. And how do you put that together? I think that's probably one of the largest lessons I learned on the leadership side is how do we just all win? That's all I want to do.
Love it. Love it.
Thank you.
So, James, I really want to thank you for your time today. I want to thank you for your stories. Thank you for everything you talked about. I think it's a brilliant conversation. So if anybody wants to find you, where do they go to find you?
So you can go to gorogue.net. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also follow Rogue on LinkedIn and Instagram if you want to see some of our quotables. But my LinkedIn is just linkedin.com/in/J Loomstein. And then you can also just Google my name, and one of the only ones, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, or our website.
Okay, I'll make sure.
MySpace. I was going to go with MySpace, but now I'll leave that one alone.
Okay, but anyway, I will put the links in the show notes so that they can go and find you and connect with you. And then I'd really encourage them to also go to gorogue.net. I think you guys have a great website, and the quotables are fantastic, and just I love what you're doing. So
appreciate it.
Thanks for being different. All right, there you have it, folks. I had a great time here with James Loomstein. So this is Warren Barry, and I'm flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond, because we're better together. Thank you so much, James.
Better together. There we go.